nation, we're all watching the Israel-Iran war, which of course is not limited to Israel and Iran, and may soon drag the entire world into a war, which is what we all fear. When missiles start to fly and people start to die, there's no telling how these things end. We're also dealing with a fanatical regime living in the 13th century in Iran. They don't think the way you do. They think in a different way. Recall World War II. Japan was a nation ruled by fanatics. Didn't mean they were evil, but they were fanatics. And they had the Bushido code, which is fight until the death. That's the Iranian regime. Of course, not the old bastard hiding in a bunker somewhere, but the people he puts out there may fight to the death. And it just may happen, and I hope it doesn't, that Israel, if pushed to the walls, and it looks like the missiles from Iran penetrated their defense shield and landed in heavily populated areas now in Tel Aviv. God knows what will happen tomorrow. The difference here, of course, is Israel took out military targets, not civilian targets. The fanatics in the Islamic world aim at civilians. That's their target, to induce terror. And so the Iranians, being fanatics, are going to raise the stakes. We keep hearing that Israel pulled off one of the greatest military coups in history, which they did. But hold on now, it's not over yet. And I want to see if we can dwell on this a little bit more and delve into it in a little more depth. And so there's no better place to go than Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which is an important book for anyone who's been studying strategy. Sun Tzu wrote centuries ago, all warfare is based on deception. And of course, it's pretty self-evident what that means in his book, The Art of War. It means that the success of any military operation relies on manipulating the enemy's perception and expectations rather than simply overpowering them with brute force. So this now is where martial arts come from on a global level. And deception can involve feigning weakness when strong, appearing distant when near, or luring the enemy into a trap, according to Sun Tzu, written centuries ago. I want to focus for this moment on what he wrote about the use of spies, which is very intriguing. He said this: the use of spies, of whom there are 5 classes: local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, surviving spies. And Sun Tzu wrote, when these 5 kinds of spy are all at work, none can discover the secret system. This is called divine manipulation of the threads. It is the sovereign's most precious faculty. But what do these things mean? Israel used all of them. Having local spies means employing the services of the inhabitants of a district. In other words, they had local Iranians working for them. Having inward spies, making use of officials of the enemy. Obviously, they did that, and all of these Iranian officials are probably now safely in Israel. Next, we have converted spies. What does that mean? According to Sun Tzu, it means getting hold of the enemy's spies and using them for your own purposes. Having doomed spies, doing certain things openly for purposes of deception and allowing our own spies to know of them and report them to the enemy. Then he writes about surviving spies. Finally, are those who bring back news from the enemy's camp. And Sun Tzu then writes, hence it is that with none in the whole army are more intimate relations to be maintained than with spies. None should be more liberally rewarded. In no other business should greater secrecy be preserved. Spies cannot be usefully employed without a certain intuitive sagacity. They cannot be properly managed without benevolence and straightforwardness. And he goes on, Again, his main point is the one I said at the beginning, right at the beginning, which is not to be forgotten. In The Art of War by Sun Tzu, I read it to you at the beginning. All warfare is based on deception. And that leads me to the next point in today's discussion, which is what deception might Iran be planning? In other words, Israel pulled off great deception. But Iran is an ancient nation. It was called Persia before the Muslims invaded and converted people to Islam. Persia was around a long time. And certainly they've studied the art of war in their military academies, just as all other nations on earth study the art of war with the young recruits in their military academies. So I'm asking now, what deception might Iran be planning? Well, I mentioned Hezbollah Unit 910, which apparently is emplaced in the USA. I'll repeat it again. Maybe you haven't heard about this. Hezbollah Unit 910 is apparently emplaced in the United States of America. Owing to Biden's open borders policy, at this time, we do not know how many of these enemies are in this nation planning a surprise attack. What might a surprise attack consist of? I'll let your imagination figure that one out. It could range from a dirty bomb in a truck. Remember them? Remember 9/11? That wasn't a dirty bomb. Was that not deception? Pulled off by our friends in Saudi Arabia? But that was deception. That was part of the art of war. And never forget that the Islamic fanatic is willing to die for his misbegotten cause. They don't think the way you and I do. They are fanatics, and they will use people willing to die for their cause. Something else to think about. Unit 910, what does it mean? Where are they? Is it a truck bomb? Will they poison our food supply, as several Chinese were caught trying to do a few weeks ago with fungi that they were trying to put on our crops to kill our crops? The art of war. Will they destroy our infrastructure by disabling our water systems in our cities through computer hacking? I don't know. How secure are our fresh water systems? They all run off computers in our water districts. Food, water, air, you name it. We have spies amongst us, enemies amongst us, owing to primarily first Obama and then Biden. And so I would say be vigilant. Don't sit here celebrating saying it's over. Ho-hum, let me go back to the ball game. I would suggest that you remain very vigilant over the next days and weeks. Don't let your guard down. What does that mean? Supplies of emergency food, emergency water, weapons, medical supplies, prescription drugs that you may need. You heard me. You think this is a panic? Well, think again. We don't know how this ends. And so let's go back to the beginning. Many of you saying, why did Israel have to do this? Well, unfortunately, although I'm an anti-war activist and a man of peace, we have Muslim nations on the earth, such as Pakistan, which have nuclear weapons, but do not threaten to wipe another nation off the planet. Unfortunately, the throwback mullahs, under the granddaddy of hate, Ayatollah Chaim Yankel there, he is the world's curse. He is actually the viper at the head of the snake of all terror on the planet. And he has been ever since he appeared on the planet because of Jimmy Carter. That's a long story that you'll have to study a little bit in history. But the Ayatollahs were nothing. There was a strongman running Iran called the Shah of Iran, a Western-educated man, and he was brutal because it's the only thing that the mullahs understand, which is brutality. And Saddam was the same thing, by the way. That may have been another era, killing Saddam Hussein, but that's a topic for another day. So the Shah, if you remember, if you go back that long into the 70s, had a secret police called Savak, and they were brutal because they knew how to control their enemies. And the American left had sympathy for the radical Islamists in Iran, and they started a war of attrition in the media against the Shah of Iran, calling him Hitler and everything under the sun. And eventually, Jimmy Carter did not back the Shah, and the Shah had to flee. And that's when the Mullahs took over Iran and destroyed the nation. Remember, Iran was a highly advanced nation before these throwbacks took over, very advanced in technology, arts, science, poetry, architecture, etc. And the Mullahs came along and with their hate squads have turned it into a dark place, a very dark place. You wouldn't know this if you went to Harvard or Berkeley. But if you study even a modicum of history, you can find out that every word I've just said to you is the truth. And so these 13th century throwbacks, the mullahs, are fanatics, probably, if not willing to die for their cause, certainly willing to have their young men die for their cause. And we do not know how many of them are in this country at this time. Remain vigilant. Do not celebrate. And tomorrow, as you know, I think it's tomorrow, there's a military parade for Trump's birthday and for the Army, whatever it is. Highly risky operation. Frankly, if I had any sway on this, I don't think it's a time to have a military parade. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think it's just the right time to show America's strength. I'm not so sure. But I know this, that all warfare being based on deception means that the Iranians are now engaged in deception. And they practice different forms of it, according to Sun Tzu. Deception involves making the enemy believe something that is not true, whether it's about your strength, position, or intentions. Psychological warfare, by controlling the enemy's perception, you can influence their decisions and actions, making them more vulnerable to your attacks. In other words, we may think that Israel took out Iran and they're incapable of reacting. That's misdirection. Feigning weakness. When you are strong, pretend to be weak to encourage the enemy to attack you in a vulnerable position. Making the enemy believe you are far away. When you are near, make them think you are far, and vice versa. Luring the enemy with bait. Create a situation that makes them believe that they have an advantage. Then strike when they are most vulnerable. Any of this ringing a bell with you? Espionage and information warfare. Gathering intelligence about the enemy is crucial for effective deception. Knowing their weaknesses and vulnerabilities allow you to create more targeted and effective deceptions. It's interesting to me that I think this very weekend in Israel, there's a gay parade. Of all things and at all times, you talk about insanity, that the Pride Parade, so-called, is going to go on in the midst of this madness. They're going to have a gay parade in the heart of Tel Aviv. Totally inappropriate at this time. Years ago, and I did this at length this morning, I quoted widely from my Countdown to Mecca written in 2015. Unfortunately, it's not in print. You can accuse me of selling a book. I wish I could sell you a book because it's a damn good book to read. There's so much history in it. But a friend of mine called and said that he was able to buy some on the used market for $3. I don't want you to buy it for the $3. I don't need the royalties. It's not going to work. But there's things in here about the history that you may want to read yourself and learn from, which is the background and making you more aware of the danger that Islam poses to the West. Because right now, this nation is particularly blind and stunningly inept, especially in the media. Yes, the president knows what's going on, and this administration, thank God, knows what's going on. But I'm wondering how much of the population knows what's going on. Analysts under Biden, for example, and under Bush, were focused on regime change in one country after another. They knew that, but they completely missed the deep radicalization that had swept Islam and informed every aspect of Muslim life. Jack Hatfield, my character, would have understood all of that. That's in his book, and it was very well researched with my good friend, the novelist, Jeff Rovin. I suggest you look into some of the history and the excitement in the spy thriller called Countdown to Mecca. The plot is the opposite of what the title implies. Countdown to Mecca sounds like a plot to blow up Mecca. Well, it is and it isn't. What it is that a group of senior military officers planned to blow up Mecca during a Hajj and kill 3 million of the most, let's say, fanatical Muslims. My hero, Jack Hatfield, gets wind of the plot through a prostitute who works with Russian diplomats in San Francisco, and she leaks it to Jack Hatfield, a reporter, who then rushes throughout this novel to stop the bombing of Mecca. It's a very interesting novel. It was a bestseller and is worth looking at. We could talk about that at length if you wish another time. I don't need to stay on forever this afternoon. Sometimes short is good. But we had Israel's airstrikes, which were miraculously amazing with uh, Israeli pilots. They were flying, it looks like F-35s. I read that 400 airplanes were involved. Do you realize how complex that was? 400 airplanes. And some of our allies were involved, but not the UK. The UK is not our ally. The UK is our enemy. Make it clear in your head. That left-wing criminal bastard who runs England, Starmer, is the enemy of everything that you believe in. Just ask the English and ask the Irish. So Israel embarked on a perilous path and dismantled Iran's nuclear program. As we know, all of it, direct aerial attacks, not using missiles, but airplanes, and destroyed one of the key uranium enrichment sites located in Natanz. Now, these sites are built only a few meters underground, and they're very vulnerable to missile attacks and aerial bombardments. They also killed a number of prominent nuclear scientists, including a former head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization. So these attacks by Israel constitute a major warning to the Islamic Republic to stop their nuclear activities. Well, will they, though? Over the past 60 years, Iran has gained the ability of a highly advanced and encompassing nuclear program, uranium enrichment plants, a heavy water plant, heavy water research reactors. We know this. We know it very well. So Israel, as part of the Operation Rising Lion attack, went after other nuclear sites and will go after other nuclear sites in the next phases of its air force or air campaign against Iran. And what might that mean? It could target the highly advanced facilities at Esfahan Nuclear Technology Center and also the Esfahan Nuclear Research Center, in particular the uranium conversion facility, where uranium concentrate is converted to uranium hexafluoride gas as feed for centrifuges to enrich uranium. The heavy water plant could be a target as well. That heavy water plant is at Iraq. It also could be a target for another attack because all the key components of this plant are tall columns built in the open. In the event of an all-out strike, the research reactor in Tehran could be targeted as well because it is vulnerable to drone, missile, and aerial strikes. Then there is the Fordow uranium enrichment facility, which is built some 60 meters inside a mountain. It is designed not to be vulnerable to attacks by drones. We've heard that. Cannot be attacked by drones, rockets, missiles, or even the U.S. bunker-busting bombs. They cannot reach the Fordow uranium enrichment facility because it's 60 meters inside a mountain. But its external or off-site electricity supply, cooling water supply, and air supply systems are highly vulnerable. You should know this, those of you who are still following me and haven't tuned out to watch something else. Uranium has now been enriched to 83.7% at Fordow, which is comparable to the 80% enriched uranium contained in the Hiroshima atomic bomb. There's also a Bushehr nuclear power plant that could come under attack. Now, that plant, the Bushehr nuclear power plant, is designed and constructed to withstand aerial attacks, according to my studies. Again, however, there are external power supplies and cooling water systems which are regarded as soft targets, and they are highly vulnerable to drone and missile strikes. Here's the problem. Extensive damage to the plant could lead to a Fukushima-like accident and release a significant quantity of radioactivity into the marine environment of the Persian Gulf. This, in turn, could lead to the extensive contamination of the ecological systems and disruption of shipping operations. It could also affect oil and gas production and the supply of water to some of the Arab states in the Persian Gulf. That's some of the background on the significance of Israel's airstrikes that is not currently being discussed to any extent. And that's all I have to say at this time. I think we have to ask ourselves a couple of questions before I go. What might Russia do? Strangely enough, the warmonger Zelensky was giving an interview again today. There he was again. He's like a pop-up nightmare, up saying we got a strike against Russia now because Russian oil just became more valuable. So Zelensky piped in for more war now rather than less war. It's hard to believe that this warmonger has not been dragged out by his hair or his high heels into The Hague. I just can't understand this. Wherever there's a conflict, he tries to make it worse and drag the whole world into a war. So Russia, what's Russia liable to do next? I don't know. What about Iraq? Is Iraq going to stay out of this? They're right on the border of Iran. What about Turkey? Very powerful military. What might Turkey, an Islamic nation, do? We don't know. So let's not sit here and say nothing's going to happen. It's all over. Heroes, etc. Wonderful. Da 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 da. Stay vigilant. I'm telling you what I am going to do, which is emergency food supplies, water supplies, medical supplies, guns and ammunition. Don't think this is panic, and I'm not selling you anything. There are no ads on this particular broadcast or podcast. I just wish I can direct you to some places to get some of the things I have just suggested that you acquire. Do not put your head in the sand and say everything will be okay and I don't care. You could do that. You could say, I don't care. What will be, will be. That's also that's a strategy as well. It also works. You can have a drink, you can watch television, you can watch a ball game and hope it doesn't affect you. It's also a strategy. Let's hope it works. Be prepared, as every Boy Scout is taught, because this war is not over. It has just begun. I'm Michael Savage. Today I just talked about Sun Tzu's writings on the art of war, which is based upon deception. I also referenced a best-selling novel published in 2015 by yours truly, by St. Martin's Press, part of a trilogy where Jack Hatfield, my alter ego, is a hero. Jack Hatfield is in Abuse of Power, Countdown to Mecca, and A Time for War. These books were ahead of their time by many years. And unfortunately, right now, some of them are right on time, 10 years later. I'm Michael Savage. I'm glad I could be with you to see the time together with you. I tried to warn you over many years. Some of you listened to me. Many of you thought I was crazy. I'll let you decide where the truth lies. Thank you for listening. Pray for America. Pray for Israel. And pray for our president, Donald Trump. Good night.